is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 24th of January 2015, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. in the Netherlands. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Event. So for today I have ready some trivium stuff. And this one is, we've done it before, but it should be repeated because none of this stuff is really easy. Some of them are really complicated. And if you've heard this before, then your mind has had the time to go over it. You're processing it, as it were, talking computer language. And then, now that you hear it a second time, you get a even better understanding, all right? This is from, let's see, where is it from? The Trivium and Quadrivium Cliff Notes by Gino Denning. You've heard of Gino Denning before, right? We've had him on the show once. And this will help get you a better understanding. Also thanks to Tragedy and Hope. Check out the website, tragedyandhope.com. These notes I'm just reading it right now. This is how it starts. These notes can be read before or after listening to the Trivium and Quadrivium podcasts from Gnostic Media. These are the notes which Gino Denning provided to Jan Irvin, who is the creator of Gnostic Media's feature film, The Pharmacratic Inquisition. If you like symbology and stuff like that, roots of religion, you should check that out, The Pharmacratic Inquisition. Let's see, I'll just copy this. Copy, I'll put that into Google, and give you guys a link in the chat. And paste that here. This is the one, open that. Put it on pause, and copy this. Now back to the chat room. There. This is a nice video which explains a lot of the symbology going on and drug-related roots of religions all over the world. Alright. 4, and this is a quote by Sir Thomas More, 1478 to 1531, Utopia Book 1. For if you, the rulers, suffer your people to be ill-educated, and their manners to be corrupted from their infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, what else is to be concluded from this, but that you first make thieves and then punish them? We are now witnessing the accumulating negative effects of omitting the three means of learning how to learn. Right? Three means learning how to learn. Trivium, right? Three is three. Trivium, there where three roads meet. Right? So, negative effects of omitting the three means of learning how to learn, which constitute the integrated classical trivium, the first three of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. The last 4 constituents are called the quadrivium. In the classical primary and secondary education curriculum, the components of the trivium, general grammar, formal brackets open Aristotelian brackets close logic, and classical rhetoric, are presented to students to train them in learning how to learn and concurrently in validly thinking systematically. The trivium is presented to methodically gather raw factual data, alright, that's your grammar, into a coherent body of knowledge, brackets open grammar, brackets close. Then to gain understanding of that body by systematically eliminating all stated contradictions within it, dialectic or logic. Right? So, removing contradictions within this body, and this is, I'm not reading now, I'm speaking. Removing contradictions in this body of knowledge that you have can be two-sided. One way in which it can be is that you've gathered so much of this data and some of it is contradicting each other, right? So one piece of data says grass is green and the other piece of data says grass is brown, right? So then you need to figure out which one of the data is usable. You need to figure out which one of the data is correct. Right? There's a contradiction there. One says blue and one says brown. One says green and one says brown, you see? So that's one way of removing a contradiction. Make sure your data is correct. Then another contradiction may arise if your understanding of the data is not correct. So that's another way that contradiction may arise. So you also need to make sure your understanding of the data is correct. Now continuing, and finally, to wisely express and utilize the valid knowledge and understanding in the objective real world. Right? That's the rhetoric part. Notice that it's not only talking, but also using the first 2 steps. Once a student is conversant with this threefold procedural pattern, he is now capable, and this is one of the great values of the trivium, of teaching himself with minimal guidance from an instructor or facilitator. How to learn any established subject such as mathematics, geometry, musical theory, and astronomy, right? That's the classical quadrivium. Then derived from those, I guess, derived from those, are physics, chemistry, history, philosophy, etc. Or of fully grasping any propositional topic that he is motivated upon which to focus, like current socio-political issues. Newly developing scientific hypotheses, historical and literary analysis, and so forth. Yeah. In other words, through the process of learning how to learn, he learns how to critically and creatively think, ... for himself. The last sentence sums up the process. The first aspect of systematic thinking is to learn the elements of a proposition or a subject in order to critically define a problem or an opportunity. This is done in the grammar and logic stages. Once defined, we use our creative thought capacity to solve the problem or find ways to take advantage of the opportunity. That's the classical rhetoric mode accomplishes this task. This makes a person a first-hand independent thinker rather than remaining a second-hand dependent thinker. If not relying on his own organized thoughts, a second-hand thinker, usually one marked by low self-esteem, has his mental content filled by various so-called authorities like the mass media and its advertising, professionals and politicians, some of whom may be unscrupulous, some of whom, officials, both benign and despotic, in schools and in the workplace. They must find it difficult, those who have taken authority as the truth, rather than truth as the authority. Apparently that's from Gerald Macy, Egyptologist. The first-hand mode, the trivium pattern of organization, is in fact the way the human mind would naturally order itself for effective thinking if the process were not aggressively discouraged by various entrenched factions in society, those self-perceived and self-proclaimed guardians of convention. Right, so this is important. The trivium is probably much older than the Greeks, right? Who were latecomers anyway, because it is the way our mind naturally works. Right? It's important to keep that in mind. To state the process in its simplest form, its grammar answers the question of the who, what, where, and when of a subject. Right? Somebody, maybe this comes later also in this PDF, but it answers the question of who, what, where, and the when of a subject can all be read as what. Because who is like, what is the identity, right? Where is like, what is the position, or what is the geographical position, right? When is, what is the time, right? So it's all kind of what. Logic answers the why of a subject, right? Rhetoric provides the how of a subject. So keep that in mind. Who, what, where, and when, grammar. Why, logic. And how is the rhetoric. How also implies action, right? A major reason the dame school or the one-roomed school house of the past being taught by one instructor and upperclassmen. Yeah. What's that, upperclassmen? Shall we put that into Google and see what we get, guys? Upperclassmen, copy. Yeah, I always hate that. Dividing people into classes. Upperclassmen. Enter. Urban Dictionary. Merriam-Webster. Let's see what they say. Definition. Upperclassman. Member of the junior or senior class in a school or college. Aha. 1871, apparently. Alright, that's all we got on this, apparently, from Merriam-Webster. What else we got? Dictionary reference. Wiki. No. What does this say? Collins English Dictionary. Upperclassman. Definition. It's the same. A junior or senior student in an American high school, college, or university. Huh. Alright. So click that away. So we can continue with the PDF. Now we know a little bit more about upperclassmen. And the homeschooling movement, now gaining traction, was and is successful in that they use the trivium method of education. Success in this case, success in this context is in producing appropriately critical, creative, self-sufficient individuals who become equipped to attract intellectual abundance into their lives, as well as that which naturally follows from it, material abundance. If a person has not been exposed to this method, it is difficult to communicate to him the serenity of mind and self-assurance, here brackets open, also known as the spiritual abundance. I don't like the word spiritual, but caused by this competence to appropriately validate one's own thinking as well as the thinking of doctrines of others. Right? It says here spiritual abundance. Well, why doesn't it say mental? Right? Spiritual sounds so new agey, right? Like, ooh, you can only have spiritual experience if you go to the Hare Krishna movement or whatever, you know? No amount of personal counseling or therapy can generate the self-esteem of having the ability to orient one's body and mind in the world through what is his most distinguishing attribute, that of his own rational thinking applied in a systematic manner. Right? So I would agree that if you do get just a basic understanding of what the trivium is and apply it in your day-to-day activities, you do get more self-esteem. You're more assured of yourself. You're more assured of what you say also. The pattern of the trivium is the foundation of this system, which produces an intuitive means to learn new material, not only during periods devoted to formal instruction, but over an entire lifetime. As the study and practice of music allows the hands to intuitively and immediately produce a melody on a piano, for instance, so the study and practice of the trivium produces intuitive and immediate critical creative thought. In being the method to know a subject rather than to only study a subject, it is truly the most fundamental preparation for the leading of a successful life. Yeah. Define successful life. Is that like by being able to buy the house you want, the car you want, things like that? Is that what they mean? A gift every child, adolescent and adult should be presented to elevate him to the dignity of self-determination. Alright, so I'm commenting on this successful life because as a philosopher, you know, I ask almost constantly the question, what is this life supposed to be about? You know, if you have no clue what the goal of this life is, how would you call it successful, right? And since I don't have a clue of what this is all about, you know, I cannot say that life is successful. There's yeah, I'm floating off a bit now, but there's I was compiling a list a couple of days ago of clues that I could find. I'll give you a few. When trying to figure out, you know, what's the goal of life, you know, and trying to get a list of clues. And one of the first things that came to mind was the sun. You know, if the sun wasn't there, life would probably not have manifested itself on this earth, right? Also, the moon came to mind because it's very important for plants, right? The relationship with plants and humans came to mind, right? Food, you know? And without plants, we wouldn't be able to eat stuff. Because also the animals live off the plants. So those are like things that came to mind when trying to figure out what's this all about. Another thing that came to mind was the, in my opinion, amazing variety of life forms on Earth that there are. So many life forms. Also what came to mind is the DNA, right? So it's like when the first molecules started to come together to form the acids that DNA is made of, it was not even surrounded by a cell, right? It was just floating around there. Only later it became into one cell, and you could speak of the first living thing, right? One-celled with DNA. And in this DNA is all of the information that is needed to create senses, for instance. Now, how did that happen? How is it that in this DNA there is the code for creating senses, like eyes, for instance? I've wondered about that a lot, you know. If you want to believe that life forms evolved on Earth, then I ask myself, well, how would an eye have evolved? If you start from scratch, start from nothing, how does the living entity sense that there is something out there called light and then adapt to it by creating an eye to be able to see the light, right? There's a huge step to make there. It seems like a step impossible to make, right? Because you have no clue that there is light out there if you don't have eyes. So how would you start developing them, right? Doesn't make sense. Not that I am a proponent of the creation theory, you know, as some Christians are. But it's just a problem that I see. All right, let's get back to the PDF. It is stressed the trivium forms a habitual pattern of mind of how to think effectively, not what to think, right? That's important. In schools today, you only get taught what to think, and if you repeat it on your exams, you know, you're passed on as a domesticated animal, right? They don't want people thinking for themselves that know how to think instead of what to think. As an added bonus, this is a serene pursuit, because this is a method devoted to the how of thinking. It is not controversial. Yeah. It is in the topics of what to think, religion, literature, philosophy, and modern science. He underlines modern here, and it's also in italic. When controversy reigns. Yep. The problem is, general education has not been the focus of the contemporary schooling establishment, but rather social engineering. That's a good one, social engineering. That's a term we should Google and see what we get. It's important that you understand what this is. I've had people on air talking about it also. Edward Bernays comes to mind, right? Now, Google, you know, I told it to search in English, but it keeps giving me these Dutch links. I hate that. Shall we try Wikipedia, see what we get from them? Social engineering is a discipline in social science that refers to efforts to influence popular attitudes and social behaviors on a large scale. All right, that sounds about right. I would say mass mind control, right? Whether by governments, media, or private groups. Social engineering can also be understood philosophically as a deterministic phenomenon. Huh. Really? As Dr. R.D. Ingthorsen alluded to, a human being is a biological creature from birth, but it is from then on shaped as a person through social influences. And it is that sense a social, and in that sense a social construction. A social engineer is one who tries to influence popular attitudes. I would not say only influence, I would say just plain out shape. You know? A social engineer is one who he shapes popular attitudes. It's not a trying, it's successful. Right? Social behaviors and resource management on a large scale. Social engineering is the application of the scientific method for social concern. I would say scientific method for mass mind control. Social engineers use the methods of science to analyze and understand social systems. No, they shape them, so as to arrive at appropriate decisions as scientists and not as politicians. Well, I don't think that they need to arrive at appropriate decisions. They create them, not by studying the social system that we live under, but by creating it. In the political arena, the counterpart of social engineering is political engineering. No, I would say we are the counterpart of social engineering. The trivium is a counterpart of social engineering. Thinking for yourself is, well, maybe I understand the word counterpart here wrong, but it seems like counter is against, right? Or opposite, right? So the opposite of social engineering is us, you and me, and everybody that attempts to think for himself. All right. Enough about that. There's more in the wiki, but we're going to get back to the PDF here. Lady Pitbull says resource management is the key word there. Yeah, lady, it also reminded me of how the term human resources, right? Unbelievable. Workforce, right? All right. The problem is general education has not been the focus of contemporary schooling establishment, but rather social engineering. It is a vile and protracted form of miseducation. After adopting the Prussian education method in America in the middle to late 19th century, this fault in educating our nation from the perspective of the general citizenry was compounded by applying the dangerous tenets of the pragmatic philosophy devised by William James and John Dewey. All right, he recommends an internet word search on each of the italicized terms in this paragraph. Italicized are here pragmatic philosophy, William James and John Dewey. All right, so let's do pragmatic philosophy. I remember from last time we already did William James and John Dewey. Pragmatic philosophy. All right, let's see what we get. It's Google even when you paste that in, you get these options to choose from. It also gives pragmatic philosophy of education. Well, since that's what we're talking about, we should probably use that one. Let's see. OregonState.edu has something on it. Backphilosophy.blogspot.com. Let's see. We need a definition, right? Let me type definition behind it. Definition. Let's see. Definition. It's not coming here. Let's see what this is. Open that. It's about pragmatism. Pragmatism is a philosophical movement that includes those who claim that an ideology or proposition is true if it works satisfactorily. That the meaning of a proposition is to be found in the practical consequences of accepting it, and that unpractical ideas are to be rejected. Pragmatism originated in the United States during the latter quarter of the 19th century. Right? That doesn't mean that it hasn't existed before, but that's when it came to the United States. Right? Although it has significantly influenced non-philosophers, notably in the fields of law, education, politics, sociology, psychology, and literary criticism, this article deals with it only as a movement within philosophy. John Dewey is mentioned here, so let's see. The term pragmatism was first used in print to designate a philosophical outlook about a century ago, and William James, who was also mentioned in this PDF, right? Yes, William James, who lived from 1842 to 1910, pressed the word into service during an 1898 address entitled Philosophical Conceptions and Practical Results, delivered at the University of California and Berkeley. James scrupulously swore, however, that the term had been coined almost 3 decades earlier by his compatriot and friend C.S. Pierre. Pierce, eager to distinguish his doctrines from the views promulgated by James, later relabeled his own position pragmatism, a name, he said, ugly enough to be safe from kidnappers. The third major figure in this classical pragmatist pantheon is John Dewey, whose wide-ranging writings had considerable impact on American intellectual life for half a century. After Dewey, however, pragmatism lost much of its momentum. Really, is that true? There has been a recent resurgence of interest in pragmatism, with several high-profile philosophers exploring and selectively appropriating themes and ideas embedded in the rich tradition of Pierce, James, and Dewey. While the best known and most controversial of these so-called neo-pragmatists is Richard Rorty, the following contemporary philosophers are often considered to be pragmatists: Hilary Putnam, Nicholas Rechter, something like that, Jürgen Habermas, sounds German, Jürgen Habermas, Suzanne Hack, Robert Brandon, and Colonel West. The article's first section contains an outline of the history of pragmatism, the second a selective survey of themes and theses of the pragmatist. Alright. In the beginning was the Metaphysical Club, a group of dozen Harvard-educated men who met for informal philosophical discussions during the early 1870s in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Right? This is to do with social engineering. It's not that they came together, oh, let's have a nice talk, a philosophical talk. No. These people from Harvard came together to be able to see how to influence the people on a massive scale. That's why they came together. Club members included proto-positivists. Positivist. Right? Positivism is also important to research. It goes way back. Future Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes and 2 then fledgling philosophers who went on to become the first self-conscious pragmatist, Charles Sanders Peirce, a logician, mathematician and scientist, and William James, a psychologist, a moralist, armed with a medical degree. See, psychology and morals, right? How do you influence morale in society? Peirce summarized his own contributions to the Metaphysical Club's meeting in 2 articles now regarded as founding documents of pragmatism. The Fixation of Belief, he writes belief here with a capital B, in 1877, and How to Make Our Ideas Clear in 1878. How to make ideas clear, that sounds like rhetoric, right? James followed Peirce with his first philosophical essay, Remarks on Spencer's Definition of Mind as Correspondence, 1878. After the appearance of the Principles of Psychology, 1890, James went on to publish The Will to Believe, The Will to Believe, and other essays in popular philosophy. The will to believe, right? That sounds like they are using the human nature's will to believe to get them to think what they want them to think. You understand? The Varieties of Religious Experience in 1902, Pragmatism, a new name for some old ways of thinking, 1907, and The Meaning of Truth, a sequel to Pragmatism. Peirce, unfortunately, never managed to publish a magnum opus in which his nuanced philosophical views were systematically expounded. Still, publish he did, though he left behind a mountain of manuscript fragments, many of which only made it to the print decades after his death. Peirce and James traveled different paths, philosophically as well as professionally. James, less rigorous but more concrete, became an esteemed public figure. And a Harvard professor, thanks to his intellectual range, his broad sympathies, and his Emersonian genius for edifying popularization. He's a good puppet. You see? That's why he got that position. He recognized Peirce's enormous creative gifts and did what he could to advance his friends professionally, but ultimately to no avail. Professional success within academia eluded Peirce. After his scandal-shrouded dismissal from Johns Hopkins University, his sole academic appointment, he toiled in isolation in rural Pennsylvania. All right, what happened there? What's the scandal about? True, Peirce was not entirely cut off. He corresponded with colleagues, reviewed books, and delivered the odd, invited lecture. Nevertheless, his philosophical work grew increasingly ingrown and remained largely unappreciated by his contemporaries. The well-connected James, and that's probably one of the most important things to be said about him, that he was well-connected, in contrast, regularly derived inspiration and stimulation from a motley assortment of fellow travelers. Now, what does that make you think of? Fellow travelers. Right? Talk about being well-connected. Sympathizers and acute critics. These included members of the Chicago School of Pragmatists, led by John Dewey, of whom more anon. What does that mean? What the heck is that? Led by John Dewey, right? Members of the Chicago School of Pragmatists, led by John Dewey. And then it goes brackets open, of whom more anon. What does that mean, brackets closed? Oxford, what the heck is that? Acerbic? Iconoclast, F.C.S. Schiller, 1864 to 1973, a self-described Protagorean and humanist. Also a term to be investigated. Humanism. Giovanni Papini, 1881 to 1956, leader of a cell of Italian pragmatists, and two of James's younger Harvard colleagues, the absolute idealist Josiah Royce, and the poetic naturalist George Santayana, 1864-1952, both of whom challenged pragmatism while being influenced by it. It should be noted, however, that Royce was also significantly influenced by Peirce. Okay, that's about enough. I'm going to put this into the chat room in case you want to keep on reading from where I left off. But that's a bit about pragmatism. Continuing from the PDF here, the party line is that children need to be surrounded by their peers in order to socialize properly in preparing them for life. All right, what do I hear here? Is that they need to be surrounded by their peers in order to fall in line. Socialization is a natural process to people. It need not be taught to them, or more to the point, programmed in them. Children need to be around family, neighbors, a few close, genuine friends when younger. Good morning, Jules. A few close, genuine friends when younger, and participants in church. Really. Social, civic, and charitable organizations in adolescence. Friends and organizations just described have their time and place in a young person's life. They are not all-consuming intrusions as modern primary and secondary schooling establishments try to make themselves. Right? I kind of tend to disagree with what's being said all of here. Children need to be around family, all right? That's okay, you should have parents. And then neighbors. Okay, why? As far as I'm concerned, children should go out of the house, meet friends, genuine friends, when younger. I agree with that. And then go and do things. Go and find out stuff. Move around. It says here, participants in church. Why? Why indoctrinate them with religion? Right? Then civic, the word here, civic. To be civilized. In other words, to be domesticated. No. You shouldn't be. Should be wild. Children should be wild. Continuing, there are self-serving, domineering social entities which perceive a gain from having general populations presented with only the protocols of a field of study and to have withheld the rationale of that field of study. All right. What's that about? I don't understand that sentence, really. The knowledge of the rationale of subjects for understanding and the protocols for the expression or application of those subjects comprises what is addressed as in general education. Let's try this again. General education is not bracketed, but what do you call that? 2 commas high in the line. The knowledge of the rationale of subjects for understanding. That's something I don't get. It says that's what it says, right? Then a comma. The knowledge of the rationale of subjects for understanding. I don't even know how to translate that in Dutch, let alone that I understand this part of the sentence only. Then it goes comma, and the protocols for the expression or application of those subjects, yeah, that's understandable, comprises what is addressed in a, quote-unquote, general education. The rationale provides the all-important understanding as to why a subject or proposition is integrated and self-intelligible by presenting the entire thought process, that's the validated arguments, behind the rationale's conclusion. The protocol is a set of instructions spawned by that consolidated understanding of the rationale with which to manifest an expressed outcome. By presenting only protocols, sounds like, by presenting only what to think, right, instead of why or how, by presenting only protocols, outcome-based education, which is in reality mind control or programming, right, is the openly stated goal of public schooling, not general understanding-based education, right? Our country is populated by the products of this policy of having only protocols presented and committed to memory. These products are designed to be obedient soldiers, pliable employees, imprudent consumers of goods and services, and other uncritical servants of established corporate and statist interest. Yeah. Can you say fascism? In not being trained to think critically and creatively, students are programmed in reading and thinking only to the level of abiding to instructions, reading a procedural manual or slavishly following edicts from on high issued by so-called authorities. Unfortunately, this is a mind-numbing action which becomes insidiously habituated. To be under the rule of taskmasters, to be dictated as to what to think by others or via the media, to labor under the illusion of being a well-informed individual, to become a stillborn adult, a lifelong adolescent. These are the results of our century-old institution. The ideal of self-determination is trampled, mercilessly, like mercenary, right? But also merchants, market, mercantile. And in its place grows self-alienation. In being aggressively indoctrinated not to think, that is, in being programmed against our very nature, is it any wonder most of us live in a constant state of low-level fear and are anxiously disoriented in an ocean of chaos without the ability to judge as to what are appropriate and beneficial goods and values. Man cannot live or maintain health without his primary means of survival, the exercise of his rational thought. Quote by Hitler, at least that's what the claim is. What luck for rulers that men do not think. Yeah. If you don't teach them to think, right? If one is trained in use of the trivium method, not only can he learn topics on his own, deduce particular rationale from particular protocol, and of course the inverse, but also develop intellectual and value judgment of a high order. Through the efficient attainment of knowledge and understanding, right? Knowledge being grammar, understanding being logic, one's intellectual capacities are awakened. Yes, that's what I would agree with. I don't believe in there are stupid people and there are smart people, right? I believe in using one's intellectual capacities. He will be comfortable at all levels of intellect, lower, higher, and subtle. He can look at the world or anything else with clarity and discernment. Yeah. Then he can act accordingly and with assurance. Said simply, he can thrive in the living of life. Yeah, I would like a definition of that. Is that again, as I said earlier in this hour, is that you're able to buy the house you like and the car you like? Is that what it is? One of the several tests to show if an individual is reaching this awakened state of education is when he can thoroughly and critically entertain various ideas without necessarily embracing them. Yeah, that's important. You should be able to entertain ideas without clinging to them. Then it goes brackets open. He comes into possession of a truly open mind. He frees himself from his own opinions and prejudices, brackets close. The nature of some other tests are quite surprising. Those will be discussed elsewhere. Again, as I have not read your book, I don't know what this is about. Who is Gene talking here to? And what book is he talking about? So Gene says, again, as I have not read your book, I suspect you have articulated the current cultural problems regarding the topic of learning and all of its effects. Because of the universality of its application, the trivium, as it has been for the last 6 millennia, at minimum, provides its adherents effectiveness in responding to most questions and situations encountered in life. The following are some websites you might find useful in exploring these concepts. There's a link here to Sayers. Alright. Let's see. I can't seem to select what. Nope. It doesn't allow me to do what I want to do. Damn it. Let's see. It doesn't work. Yes. Allow. Here we go. Lost Tools of Learning. We all did this on air, right? But just in case you've never heard of the Lost Tools of Learning, there's a link in the chat. And this one, it says server not found. Well, let's put this like that. Get that away. There. Now you should find something. Yes, it does. Copy that. Visit this site if you've never been there. And the third one is also, what's this? Allow. Ashbrook, Strengthening Constitutional Self-Government. Interesting. The classical trivium remains the best course of learning. Alright. By Terence Moore. One thing, I'll put this link also into the chat. There you go. One thing that is never studied in modern progressive schools of education is the classical medieval organization of studies known as the trivium. Since classical education regards human beings foremost as thinking creatures, at every level of education, youth must be invited to think about the great problems of the physical and moral worlds. All right, I understand the physical world, right? But moral world? What the hell does he mean with that? Nonetheless, the ancients, right, knew that learning must be tailored to the age of the student. Therefore, ancient educators, such as the great Quintilian, followed a carefully graduated curriculum that corresponded to the child's level of understanding and his psychological makeup. Dorothy Sayers has explained the trivium in her sermonal essay, The Lost Tools of Learning. Alright, so you begin with grammar at a youngest possible age, like 5, 6, or 7. Then later, like 12 or 11, something like that. You start teaching them logic. And then 14 or so, 15, the rhetoric stage, or even earlier. Young people have to begin at the beginning. At the first stage of education, students must master the basics or the grammar of every subject. They must learn to read, use the parts of the words or phonemes. That's how things sound, right? In order to master the words themselves. They must know the grammar of their own language, which means correct spelling and proper word usage. Yeah, that's special grammar. We are more concerned with general grammar. They learn the people, places, and events of world history. Yeah. Yeah, I had to laugh there because, you know, history is full of lies. They gain a basic number sense by manipulating numbers in various mathematical arrangements. Yeah, number is interesting. Yeah, I find it strange, you know, that we as humans, we kind of came up with the idea like 1, 2, 3, you know. And then it turns out that even in the universe, as it behaves, these numbers are applicable. Now that's kind of strange to me. How can that be, right? Students learn to read music, to sing and play basic instruments. All right, music is already in the quadrivium. And to listen closely to various genres of music. They learn to recognize and classify. Number, by the way, is also already in the quadrivium. This is not about trivium. It's about step further. They learn to classify and recognize. They learn to recognize and to classify, various parts of the physical universe. They should particularly learn the different kinds of animals, plants, and the planets of our solar system and various constellations in our galaxy. At this juncture, education relies heavily on young people's memory. By nature, children love to memorize things. Yeah. All right, we're gonna get back to the PDF here. Click these away. That one can also go. That one too. Die ook weg. All right. So back to the PDF. Of course, a word search of trivium schools and liberal arts would be helpful. I wish you all the best. I wish you all the best to you in your speaking career. All right, I don't understand how to read that sentence. I wish you all the best to you in your speaking career, comma. Doesn't that to you is a bit overdone? And I hope these might be seeds for furthering the cause of thought, should you decide to research and write about them. these might be seeds for furthering the cause of thought. How am I supposed to understand that? The cause of thought, and he spells thought with a capital T. Interesting. Warmest regards, Jean O'Denning. Then P.S. The following is an excerpt from another letter which may better clarify the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Liberal is used here not in a modern but in a classical sense. It is literally liberating or setting individual minds free from ignorance through the understanding of reality. Yeah. That's a whole philosophical issue. If you don't understand reality, you're living in a dream. As regards contemporary society, this understanding would liberate us from the taskmasters of all sorts. Despots in schools, in the workplace, unscrupulous professionals, and self-serving propagandists in government, media, and advertising. By giving us the freedom to competently explore reality for ourselves. Yeah. Difficult word there, reality. The trivium. 1. General grammar. 2. Formal logic. 3. Classical rhetoric. And as you may already know, specifically in that order, not any other order. The quadrivium. 4. Arithmetic, which is number. 5. Geometry, which is number in space. 6. Music, which is number in time. And 7. Astronomy, which is number in time and space. The trivium, which pertains to mind, the elementary 3. You can find this also in triviumeducation.com. 1. Grammar. Discovering and ordering facts of reality comprises basic systematic knowledge. Right? So, grammar, knowledge. Not only the rules developed and applied to the ordering of words, concepts for verbal expression and communication, but our first contact with conscious order as such. This is the initial self-conscious technique used in properly, discursively or sequentially, organizing a body of knowledge from raw, factual data for the purpose of gaining understanding through logic, and thus also organizing the individual human mind. It is the foundation upon which all other methods of organization and order are built. Alright, now we're going to break grammar apart in special and general, but before we go there, I'm going to welcome everybody in the chat. Dan, Derby, Hopper, JJ, Jules, Keeper, Lady, Lumpar, Propaganda, Proper Chicks. Oh, she's already in there like 4,000 minutes or so. Vengeful, Vince, Pinch, Nut, Cap, Gringo, and One and On. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that. If I miss it, you can ask your questions via Skype. Just contact me at Solvinur. Send me a contact request and you can ask questions there. SOLVINUR and Skype if you have any questions that I missed in the chat. Alright. So, grammar. 2 things. Special grammar and general grammar. Special grammar properly relates words to other words within a specified language, like German, Chinese, Dutch, right? General grammar relates words to objective reality in any language and applies to all subjects as the first set of building blocks to integrated or fully mindful objective knowledge. Right, so the thing to get from that sentence is building blocks. Now it does sound a little Mason-like, doesn't it? A body of knowledge which has been gathered and arranged under the rules of general grammar can now be subjected to logic for full understanding, which emphatically is a separate intellectual procedure, right? That's something that I tried to get more information on in the past, but I just couldn't find it. What are the rules of general grammar? So let's put that into Google and see what we get. General grammar, not punctuation and where to put a comma. No, 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 I don't want to know about that. English grammar, grammar rules, grammar lessons. See, that's what you get. You get punctuation and stuff like that. I want to know the rules for general grammar, not special grammar. See? There's no general grammar to be found when you type it into Google. Yeah? That's not good. See? And again, I can't find it. Free English grammar, grammar overview, English grammar. Blah, 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 blah. The general rule when changing a verb. See, it's not about general grammar. What are the rules? See, I got a hard time finding any information about that. Yep. This one. English grammar, general writing with tips. No. Very hard to find anything about it. Basic grammar rules, and they talk about spelling errors, right? That's special grammar. We're not interested in that. Right, so, bye. Let's keep continuing. Let's keep going on here. 2. Logic. Developing the faculty of reason in establishing valid, which is non-contradictory, relationships among facts. Yields basic systematic understanding. Alright, so what you can also see this as is like logic is establishing relationships between building blocks, right? Do these building blocks fit together? Can you construct something with it? And if you're finished with the construction, does the construction stand or does it fall apart? You see? If it falls apart, that means that there's contradictions in there, right? It is a guide for thinking correctly, thinking without contradiction. More concisely, it is the art of non-contradictory identification. Yeah, that's something from Ayn Rand, Zionist pig that she is. But she's correct there, as far as I'm concerned. It's the art of non-contradictory identification, the law of identity, which goes back thousands of years. The work of logic is proof. Proof consists of establishing the truth and validity of a concept or proposition in correspondence with objective, factual reality by following a self-consistent chain of higher-level thought back down to foundational primary concepts or axioms. Then goes brackets open. Existence, consciousness, and causality. Alright, those are three very difficult topics. Existence to me is the same as reality or truth or that which is. Consciousness is such a vague term, it's hard to even start talking about it. And that's kind of strange, right? Because everyone has it. How do we not know what consciousness is, right? Consciousness, yeah. In Dutch we say bewustzijn. It means that you are aware of things. But it's not only that, it's more than being aware of things. And causality, yeah. Also a tough one. You know, you've probably heard me say that the Greeks, for instance, some of them thought that the universe has always existed, therefore it cannot have a cause, because it has always existed. It was always there. There was no cause for the universe to come into existence, because it was always there, you see. So causality is a tough one. We also came across, if you remember, when we did the fallacies, you know, that were confusing causalities. It is a means of keeping us in touch and grounded to objective reality. Yeah, objectivism, Ayn Rand, right? It is a means of keeping us in touch and grounded to objective reality in our search for valid knowledge and understanding. Logic brings the rhythm of the subjective thoughts of the mind and the subsequent actions of the body into harmony with the rhythm of the objective universe. Wow. Difficult one, that. This is the intended tone of the entire letter. Yeah, Dan says, aware in German is bewusst. Yes. In Dutch it's bewust. Right? But the first two letters of that word you can actually take away. Because it's a prefix. Right? You get bestaan, beleven, all of those words start with be, and you can take them away. And so what you're left with is woest. Now, woest, then, you will know, sounds like wist. Right? Wist is knowing. Right? To know something. Wist comes from the word wicca. Think of witch. Right? On a broom, remember? These witches were very knowledgeable. Right? So the word woest ties to the word wist, wissen in German, W-I-S-S-E-N, which means knowledge, to know something. By the way, you all heard me talk about the word ignore, right? Ignorant as a tie to the word ignore, to ignore something. And then I said, well, maybe it's better to say nescient. Not knowing, not science is know, to know, also to know things, right? But ignorance also ties to gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S. Yeah? So it could also mean not knowing. All right, let's see. Where were we? This is the intended tone of the entire letter, to amicably synchronize individual mental processes and their attendant actions with the process of our surrounding natural, factual existence over the period of a lifetime. 3. Rhetoric. Applying knowledge and understanding expressively comprises wisdom. In other words, it is systematically usable knowledge and understanding. Yeah? So wisdom or rhetoric has the first two steps, general grammar and logic, in them. You see? It's the two words that are most important here are applying and usable. To explore and find the proper choice of methods for cogently expressing the conclusions of grammar and logic on a subject in writing and or oral argumentation. The enunciation of these conclusions is called a statement of rationale. The set of instructions deduced from the rationale for the purpose of applications of the conclusions in the real world is called a statement of protocols. Yep. Alright, let me get some of my coffee. Light my cigarette. It continues. 1. Discovering and arranging knowledge under general grammar. 2. Fully understanding that knowledge under formal logic. And 3. Wisely expressing and using that knowledge and understanding under classical rhetoric are 3 distinctly different but interrelated disciplines which yield, when applied as an integrated unit, truth. Yeah. See, that's why I don't see any difference between reality, existence, and truth. They're all the same to me. It continues with the quadrivium, which pertains to matter and quantity, the advanced form. Mathematic, which is number in itself, which is a pure abstraction that is outside of space and time. Geometry, number in space. Music or harmonic theory, which is number in time. Then astronomy, which is number in space and time. Also known as ABCD. A, number. B, geometry. C, harmonics. D, cosmology. The subject of the quadrivium, originally organized by Pythagoras, the ancient Greek philosopher, he may have organized it, but it's not his idea. He got it probably from Egypt. And the Egyptians probably got it from India or maybe China. Provided much of the more advanced study prior to the integration of the science of physics by Galileo and Isaac Newton. This integration precipitated the rise in studies of other specialized sciences. But, again, you can see the sensible and consistent manner in which the material of knowledge was presented. In the Middle Ages, the trivium was the method of learning presented in primary education, and the quadrivium comprised the subjects to be learned by scholars in secondary education. Right? So, what happened before the Middle Ages? We lost it. And then the Muslims brought it back to us. Today, the methods of learning and thinking via the trivium have not been surpassed, even as the galaxy of subjects to be explored and learned has expanded immensely. No, you can never, ever surpass that, because the trivium is a natural way of how your mind works. You see? The various formal arts including the liberal arts, are classical concepts from ancient Greece and Rome, which were refined in medieval times. Yeah. Refined, you say. The following contrast the three classical arts in contemporary terms. So here they go like back to ancient Greece and Rome, because that's where Western civilization has its roots. But this quote-unquote knowledge about the trivium and the quadrivium is older than that. 1. The liberal arts and sciences, of which there are 7, free a person who is informed to qualitatively know the mind and the method of training it through the trivium. Knowledge of the quadrivium provides an individual the freedom to quantitatively discern the aspects of physical nature. The realm of extension, mind does not possess this quality. What does that mean? The realm of extension. What the heck is that? Copy that, put that in the Google, see what we get. Paste. Enter. Game board, yep. Extension in metaphysics. Realm of extension. Spinoza comes here. Jewish Dutch. A Jew who lived in the Netherlands, who's known as a philosopher. Hard to find anything about this, guys. Realm of extension. What the heck is that? Let's see what this is. Google Books. Probably not going to get what we are looking for. No. If motion and rest is explanatory central in this way, one can see how it pervades the realm of extension and can be called an infinite mode. Obviously, for Spinoza, the notion of motion and rest will figure into the law's extended nature. He sees such laws as pervasive throughout the realm of extension. What is it? Is it the universe? Or what's going on here? Here's another one. Some examples of infinite modes may help to clarify the notion. Let's focus on infinite modes of extension. The attribute of extension is infinite because it pervades the entire realm of extension. What the heck is that? I have no clue what that is, guys. No idea. Let's try this again. Knowledge of the quadrivium provides an individual the freedom to quantitatively discern the aspect of physical nature. Yeah, so we're talking about the universe here. Discern aspects of physical nature, and then dash the realm of extension. The realm of that which is outside of you? Mind does not possess this quality. Really? Then if that is true, how do I, and I'm speaking for myself here, I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience, but when I drive my car, for instance, and I come onto a crossroads, I know if there's a car coming from the right or not, even if there are buildings in between. I don't have to see. My mind extends itself outside of my body and knows if there's a car or a bike or a pedestrian coming from the right. So I don't know what they mean here. That it's not mind does not possess this quality. What do they mean? I don't get it. Do they mean like mind is only inside of you? I don't know. In human perspective, mind and matter are the total of reality. Oh, really? What about consciousness? The liberal arts are the study of reality as well as a guide to abundant living in that reality. Again, define abundant living. Until recently in the West, the study of the 7 liberal arts was considered the paramount study, to be sought even beyond the pursuit of theology. Yeah, theology comes after the 7 liberal arts, like philosophy. The utilitarian or servile arts prepare a person to serve another person, the state or corporation or a business, and to earn a living. Yeah, this is domestication. And to me, as a philosopher, this is creepy. You know, that's not what life is for. To serve the state. The occupational professions, trades, and technical vocations comprise these arts. Servile, right? The word serve is already in there, right? Arts teach us how to provide for a living, but not how to live, right? It says here, servile arts teach us how to provide for a living. What is the thing that comes to mind immediately is money, right? But to survive in this world, we did that without money for thousands, if not millions of years. It's nature that provides a living for us by growing plants and fruits that we can eat. And growing plants that we can use to build shelter. Growing woods that we can use to build a fire so we don't freeze in the winter. Right? That's how we live. How we survive. But these servile arts, you know, to me it sounds like to be domesticated. Like a fracking animal. Continuing, these are the only arts, regrettably, presented to most of us today. Yeah, regrettably indeed. You know, those servile arts. 3. The fine arts, if of the higher sort, attempt to elevate the human experience by communicating truth throughout the beautiful and the sublime. Architecture, painting, sculpture, literature, music, drama, and dance comprise the 7 fine arts. Alright? So that's what I agree with also, that I heard from somebody else, I won't tell you who, is that the arts, and especially these fine arts, their meaning is to express truth. That's what it's for. Right? Architecture, painting, sculpture, literature, music, drama, and dance. Alright, now for some essential terms. Existence. And now there's something about language also. If you've heard my interview with Gene O'Denning, he is able to translate these words like entity, action, attribute, and relationships into actual grammar. Right? Entity would be noun, action would be verb, you see? So existence, every entity, action, attribute, and relationship that is, was, or ever will be. And I've said this before when we read this for the first time, but I'm going to say it again. Existence has nothing to do with things that were in the past or are going to be in the future. Those do not exist. There's only now. The past doesn't exist, brackets open, anymore, brackets close, and the future doesn't exist, brackets open, yet, brackets closed. Right? That's a conclusion I've come to as a philosopher. And when you're trying to define existence, it's only now. Next is identity. That which an existent is, the sum of its attributes and characteristics. Yeah. The next word is consciousness. The faculty of awareness of that which exists. The faculty of awareness. So humans have a faculty. Every human is conscious, right? If I translate it into Dutch, the word bewustzijn again. Consciousness in Dutch is bewustzijn. There's the word zijn is also at the end there, which means to be. But it's not a prefix, but something that comes at the end of a word. You can also scrap that. The first two letters also. What you're left with is wika, wissen, knowing. To be aware is also to know, right? But how is it a faculty of knowing? I don't understand. What is this? Hoppala. Put that into Google. See what we get. Faculty. What the heck is faculty? Paste. A faculty is a division within a university. No, that's not what I mean. Faculty definition. You're talking about school here again. An inherent power or ability. Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. It's an inherent power or ability. Right? So, consciousness, the ability of awareness of that which exists. Yeah. But it's not something that one has or one does not have. Everyone has it. You know, I mean, it's when I say it's not an ability that one has or one doesn't have, I mean with that it's an ability that everybody has. So it's a bit of a overstatement as far as I'm concerned. Why the faculty? Why not say consciousness and then dash awareness of that which exists? Why would it be the faculty of? When everybody has it. That's overstating, is it not? Alright. Now, a little bit more about this consciousness. Because as you probably know, there are substances out there which will influence your consciousness, like alcohol, for instance, or weed, or other drugs, DMT, ecstasy, all of these things. They influence your consciousness. You actually feel your consciousness changing. Does that mean that your ability to be aware of that which exists changes? So you see, I think that consciousness is much more than only an ability to be aware of that which exists. Next word, validation. The process of establishing an ideal's relation to reality. Now, see if I can... it doesn't let me do that. Yes, now there it goes. Come on. I want to put this into the chat, guys, so you can see why I'm having trouble reading this. Copy this, put that in the chat. Validation. All right, validation. And then it says this in the PDF. The process of establishing what? An ideal Euro-TM's relation to reality? That's a typo, of course. But because of that typo, I don't know what's being meant here. Validation, the process of establishing an ideal relation to reality. That's probably what it is. See here also, there it goes brackets open, existence, right? That which is real exists. That which is real is true or truth. That's why I don't see any difference between those three. To validate, or to establish a relation between what? Your understanding of reality and that which exists? Or what? Next, law of causality. An entity must act in accord with its nature. This is corollary to identity mentioned above. Logic, the art of non-contradictory identification. The method by which we can validly think for ourselves. Now, I would say the method by which we can remove contradictions. Yeah, that's logic. Next is that in which reside all beings. Oh yay, this is from the Gita, but it's a very crude translation from the Bhagavad Gita. There are many better ones. That in which reside all beings, and which resides in all beings, which is the giver of grace to all, the supreme soul of the universe, the limitless being, I am that, from the Amribhitnu Upanishad of ancient India. Yeah, it's taken from a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. But it's a very crude translation. Alright, so that in which reside all beings, that's the universe. Right? We're all in it. And which resides in all beings, well, that's kind of strange, right? The universe is in all of us. Is this like a very strange way of saying as above, so below? Which is the giver of grace to all, right? The universe, the giver of grace to all. Phew. The supreme soul of the universe. Now those are two words that sound very New Age-like, right? Supreme soul. That's supposed to be God, right? Next is also, this is quoted as from being from the Bhagavad Gita, also a very crude translation. There are those who discern through the eye of knowledge that there is only the field and the awareness of the field. All right. What I've learned from word-for-word translation of this verse is that the field is your body. Right? Then, so this would read, there are those who discern. Yeah, if you have any discernment, you use your third eye In other words, you use your mind through the eye of knowledge. That's your third eye, that's your mind. That there is only the body and the awareness of the body from the Gita, right? This kind of alludes to that everything else is illusion, as they would call it, right? That's why I say this is a very crude translation. Because it says here, there is only, right? That means that the rest is not. And that which is not is an illusion, you see? I don't subscribe to this view. Not at all. This references these two verses we just read. One, philosophy, the two primary axioms, existence and consciousness. And two, modern science, field theory. No, it does not. The field is meant in this verse is your body. That's how the word-for-word translation comes out. And then philosophy, it says here the two primary axioms, existence. Yeah, well, if I say truth is the same as existence or reality, then yes. And consciousness, right? So, because for me as a philosopher, philosophy is about truth. That's the most important thing. Now comes something I totally disagree with. Your vision will become clear only when you look inside your being. Who looks outside is led to imaginings. Who looks inside awakens. Alright, so it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the other way around. So first of all, it says here, who looks outside is led to imaginings. Or imaginings means illusions, again. Right? Trying to make you think that the outside world is illusionary. No, it's not. The outside world is that which exists, or existence. Then he says, who looks inside awakens. No, that's very New Age-like. That makes you think of people sitting in Zen Buddhism, right? You don't awaken then when you disregard all of which is going on around you, outside of you. On the opposite side, if you look outside, that's when you begin to awaken. Right? Because you see all of the contradictions and you start removing them and you get a better understanding of what reality is really about instead of what has been promulgated by the mainstream media and such, and governments. When you look outside, you find that what has been presented to you as truth is a lie. You don't find that when you look inside. When you look inside, you start dreaming. Right? That's from C.G. Jung. Now, beneath that, it says, do not slavishly accept pre-digested thoughts. Learn to think for yourself. Yeah, exactly. Addendum to the letter above from the Nevada Journal. Prussia education system. Are we teaching American citizens or training Prussian serfs? From a speech by Senator Ann O'Connell. Adapted by Diane Alden. How do we Americans begin to understand the problems we are experiencing today with our educational community and with our system of education? Oddly enough, the answer to this and other perplexing questions regarding the education go back in history to Napoleon. Napoleon's defeat of the Prussian army in 1806. Because of the Prussians' failure to defeat Napoleon, Germany took a hard look at its institutional primary school system. This introspection led to the conclusion that Prussian pride and power could only be restored by restructuring that system. A strategy was devised in which the Prussian government would set up a forced government educational system which would turn out well-disciplined students who would follow orders without questioning authority. To accomplish this feat, the goal of educating children became a national priority, permeated with strategies adapted to turn out a national workforce rather than an educated citizenry. Every step in the education process was calculated to offer authority figures the least amount of trouble and consequently train a well-disciplined, albeit docile, citizen. Of course, the government's attitude towards ordinary citizens did not carry over to the aristocrat upper class. About 200 families that owned most of the properties and controlled the purse strings in Prussia, and who were intent on keeping it that way. These families did not want their children attending schools with lower classes. They're talking about people here, not the classes themselves. In the course of things, the new educational protocol gave the upper class choice in deciding the kind of school their children would attend. A choice it did not offer to the average German. .5% of the population were educated as to how to learn and think systematically. To see the big picture. They were given a liberal arts education with particular emphasis on the trivium. 5.5% were taught how to partially think by having only the grammar of subjects or disintegrated portions of the trivium presented. That's where we are at also, We've heard of the trivium, and we may know that it's grammar, logic, rhetoric, but a deep study into this is very hard to get. These were prepared for the servile arts, occupational professions, trades, technical disciplines, and military police duties. The remainder of the children who were conscripted into the schooling system had the instruction of methods of self-teaching and effectual systematic thought replaced by programming designed to produce uncritical servants of the state. The Prussian system may seem familiar to Americans in that it demanded compulsory attendance, national training for teachers, national testing for all students. Important because it gave the government the ability to classify children for potential job training, national curriculum, set for each grade, and mandatory kindergarten. The mandatory kindergarten also put the family unit under enormous stress. Mandatory kindergarten was necessary because it served to break the influence of the mother over the child, thus making the child more responsive to government influence. So how did the Prussian system get from Germany to the United States? And what reasons were offered for its adoption? The Prussian system proved to be a success for that government's purposes. By the late 1800s, men in the United States, including Horace Mann, Barnes Sears, and Calvin Stove, heard about the successes of the Prussian system. They traveled to Germany to investigate how the educational process worked. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted. How it used to be. Up until the late 1800s, a good education in the United States could be obtained without government interference or oversight. Surprisingly, 50% of a population of 3 million in 1776 were indentured servants. What the heck is that? And 20% were African slaves. Yet during that time, 600,000 copies of Thomas Paine, Common Sense, had been sold in the United States and had been read by countless Americans. By 1812, with a population of approximately 7 million, Pierre Dupont wrote in Education in the United States that out of every 1,000 persons, fewer than 4 cannot read or do numbers. Alright, today the latest number that I have here from the Netherlands is that out of every 100 now 4 cannot read. So that's 4% illiteracy. That's a lot compared to 1812. Only 4 promille. He attributed this fact to traditional dinner table debates over passages read from the Bible. In other words, children learned how to read with an understanding of what they were reading, and they knew their numbers. All this education took place at home or in one-room schoolhouses or dame schools, primarily taught by women. The children who came out of these schools grew up to be self-reliant and individualistic, in marked contrast to the Prussian system, which produced an obedient, collectivist, trained populace. Another development added to the growing furor and revolution in American education. In the early 1800s, what is commonly known as the PhD did not exist in the United States. Then a well-connected American named Edward Everett went to Germany to take courses and returned to this country as the first American to receive a PhD degree. Eventually, 10,000s of Americans' wealthiest families would send their sons to obtain a PhD in Prussian universities. Ultimately, this development would affect the educational and intellectual makeup of the entire education system from kindergarten through college. Alright, this is where we're gonna have to stop because it's 58. So, I want to thank everybody in the chat. Buzz, Chat, Dan, Durry, Hopper, JJ, Joe, Jules, Lady Pitbull, Lamperdeed, Purple Venge, Vu, 1V, 1Cap, and not last but not least, Vincent Easley. So thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week and we'll pick this up where we left off.
The very word secrecy is repugnant
with the trivium. So thanks all. Take care. See you next week.
Opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
to create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific cast.